The great station hung in space like a silver star. Apex Prime had stood for 3,000 years, watching over the galaxy's most important tradition. Today, thousands of beings filled its massive halls, and the air buzzed with dozens of languages, all translated by small devices in everyone's ears. Commander Throck stood 12 feet tall, his gray skin covered in natural armor plates that clicked when he moved. He was a Crithian, and his people had won the last 3 trials. Around him, other warriors gathered. The Vexthor floated in their containment fields, their bodies made of pure energy. The Gorath stomped on legs thick as tree trunks, their silicon bodies scraping against the metal floor. Everywhere Throck looked, he saw the galaxy's finest warriors. Another easy victory, Throck said to his second-in-command. Look at them. Strong, yes, but none match Crithian might. At the far end of the hall, a small group stood quietly. Ambassador Elena Vasquez watched the proceedings with careful eyes. She was human, and her people were new here. Only 50 years ago, humans had discovered they were not alone in the universe. Now they stood in the Galactic Concordat, the youngest members among species that had traveled the stars for millennia. We shouldn't even be here, whispered Daniel Park, Elena's assistant. Look at them. We're like children in a room full of giants. Elena nodded slowly. She had to agree. Humans had sent no warriors to the trials. What would be the point? Their strongest soldiers would break like twigs against any of these beings. Better to watch and learn. The massive doors at the chamber's end began to open. A hush fell over the crowd. Even Throck stood straighter, his battle-scarred face showing something like respect. Through the doors came the Arbiter. It was not alive, not in any way the gathered species understood. The Arbiter was a machine, but also more than a machine. It had been built by the progenitors, the ancient race that had vanished 5,000 years ago. Nobody knew how it worked. Nobody could damage it or command it. The Arbiter simply existed, and once every century, it chose the warriors who would compete in the trials of worth. The artifact floated into the center of the chamber, a sphere of black metal covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. Light seemed to bend around it, and reality felt thinner near its surface. It had no voice, but words appeared in everyone's mind, translated perfectly into their own language. The trials begin. Approach for judgment. Throck stepped forward first, as was his right as the previous champion. He placed his massive hand against the Arbiter's surface and felt the familiar tingle as it scanned him. He had done this before. He had been chosen before. He waited for the acceptance. Unworthy. The word hit Throck like a physical blow. He staggered back, his hand dropping away from the sphere. Around the chamber, voices rose in confusion. Unworthy? The champion? That had never happened. There must be a mistake, Throck said, but his voice sounded uncertain even to himself. Next candidate. A Vexthor warrior approached, confident in their ancient psionic powers. They touched the sphere with tendrils of pure thought. Unworthy. A Gorath, armor thick enough to withstand plasma fire, placed a crystalline hand against the surface. Unworthy. One by one, warriors approached. One by one, the Arbiter rejected them all. Species that had competed for generations found themselves turned away. The snake-like Sarith, whose venom could drop a Crithian in seconds. The cloud beings of Nebulous Choir, who could suffocate enemies with their bodies. The mechanical Synthros Union, who felt no pain and never tired, all unworthy. After 3 hours, not a single warrior had been accepted. The great chamber had descended into chaos. Ambassadors shouted at each other. Warriors demanded explanations. The Concordat Council members huddled in emergency session. Elena watched it all with growing concern. Without the trials, the ancient treaties meant nothing. For 3,000 years, the Concordat had maintained peace through this system. Species competed. One emerged victorious, and everyone accepted the results. Resources were distributed, disputes were settled, and war was avoided. But now? What happens if nobody is chosen? Daniel asked quietly. Elena knew the answer. She had studied the old records. War, she said simply. Species will take what they think they deserve. Old grudges will resurface. The Concordat will collapse. As if hearing her words, the Arbiter's surface began to glow brighter. Words formed again in everyone's minds. No worthy combatants detected. Trials cannot proceed. The chamber exploded with noise. Throck roared his frustration, smashing a metal bench into scrap. Other warriors followed his example. their anger and confusion turning to violence against the station itself. Security forces moved in, trying to restore order. In the chaos, Elena felt a buzz at her wrist. Her communication device showed an urgent message from the Concordat Council. She was being summoned immediately. The council chamber was quieter but no less tense. 7 beings sat around a circular table, representing the oldest and most powerful species. Chancellor Vexmore, a Vexthor elder, floated at the table's head. Ambassador Vasquez, the chancellor said, "Humanity is our newest member. You have no stake in the old ways, no pride invested in the trial's history." Elena waited, unsure where this was going. "We have a proposal," another council member said. "Let humanity attempt the scanning." "But we sent no warriors," Elena protested. "We have nothing that could compete with—" "Let us worry about competition," the chancellor interrupted. "Right now we need anyone the arbiter will accept. If the trials do not proceed, war is inevitable. Billions will die." The chancellor paused. "Will you ask your people to try?" Elena looked at the 7 desperate faces around the table. She thought about war spreading across the galaxy. She thought about Earth, so new to this community, being caught in the crossfire. "Yes," she said finally. "We'll try." The message went out to Earth on faster-than-light channels. Elena explained the situation to the government officials back home. They had 72 hours to send candidates before the Concordat officially declared the trials void. Elena expected soldiers, maybe scientists, perhaps diplomats trained in negotiation and conflict. Instead, 48 hours later, 5 very ordinary people arrived at Apex Prime. Dr. James Chen was 58 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes behind old-fashioned glasses. He walked with a slight limp from a childhood accident. He was a pediatric surgeon from San Francisco, and he looked confused about why he was on a space station. Maria Santos was 34, strong, but not in the way warriors were strong. She was a firefighter from São Paulo, with burn scars on her forearms and calluses on her hands. She kept looking around nervously, her fingers drumming against her leg. Yuki Tanaka was 67, a small woman with white hair tied back in a practical bun. She had spent 40 years coordinating disaster relief across Asia, from earthquakes to tsunamis. She moved slowly but with purpose, her eyes taking in everything. Marcus Webb was 29, tall and lean, with the patient expression of someone used to explaining things carefully. He taught special education in Chicago, working with children everyone else had given up on. He smiled easily, even here. Aisha Okafor was 42, with dark skin and darker eyes that had seen too much. She was a trauma counselor who traveled to war zones, helping people put their minds back together after violence tore them apart. She stood very still, watching everything. Elena met them in the docking bay and her heart sank. These were good people. She could see that immediately. But warriors, against beings that could crush steel with their bare hands. "Ambassador," Dr. Chen said, shaking her hand, "I think there's been a mistake. I'm a doctor, not a fighter." "No mistake," Elena said quietly. "Please come with me. I'll explain everything." She led them through the station, trying to ignore the stares. Word had spread that humanity was sending candidates. Alien beings stopped to watch as the 5 humans passed. Elena heard laughter, saw gestures that needed no translation. These aliens thought it was a joke. In a private briefing room, Elena explained the trials, the arbiter, and what had happened. The 5 humans listened in growing disbelief. "You want us to be scanned by an ancient alien artifact?" Marcus said slowly. "To see if we're worthy to fight in galaxy-wide combat trials?" "Yes, but we're not fighters," Maria said. "I mean, I'm strong, sure, but I fight fires, not people." "I work with children," Marcus added. "I'm 67 years old," Yuki pointed out. Aisha said nothing, just watched Elena with those knowing eyes. "Why us?" Dr. Chen finally asked. "Why not send soldiers?" Elena had wondered the same thing. The message from Earth had been brief. These 5 had volunteered. The selection committee had chosen them over hundreds of military personnel. No explanation given. "I don't know," Elena admitted, "but Earth trusted you enough to send you. Will you try?" The 5 humans looked at each other. Some silent communication passed between them. Finally, Dr. Chen nodded. "We came all this way," he said. "We'll try." The great chamber was even more crowded than before. News had spread across the station. Humans were attempting the scanning. Most aliens came to watch the comedy. A few came out of curiosity. None came expecting success. Throck stood near the front, his massive arms crossed. "This is an insult," he growled. "These soft things cannot possibly be worthy." The Arbiter floated in the center of the chamber, waiting. The 5 humans entered, looking very small and very human against the backdrop of alien warriors. Elena walked beside them, her jaw set with determination. "Remember," she whispered, "just place your hand against the surface. It won't hurt." Dr. Chen stepped forward first. His hand trembled slightly as he reached out. He thought about the surgeries he had performed. The 36-hour operation to separate conjoined twins when everyone said it was impossible. The 4-year-old with a brain tumor who shouldn't have survived but did. The countless nights without sleep. The pain in his hands from arthritis. The years sacrificed to save children he would never see again. His palm touched the cool surface of the Arbiter. The sphere erupted with light. Symbols raced across its surface faster than eyes could follow. The entire chamber held its breath. Worthy. The word echoed in every mind present. Silence fell like a hammer. Throck's mouth hung open. Other aliens stared in disbelief. A human, the Arbiter accepted a human. Maria approached next, her heart pounding. She thought about the warehouse fire when she was 23. The building collapsing around her, flames everywhere, and she had heard crying. A child trapped in the basement. She went down when everyone else evacuated. She found the boy, got him out, collapsed from smoke inhalation afterward. She nearly died. She would do it again. Worthy. Marcus walked to the Arbiter calmly. He thought about Tommy, the student everyone said was unteachable. Severe autism, nonverbal, violent outbursts. Marcus spent 2 years learning Tommy's language, understanding his world. Now Tommy could read, could write, could smile. The fight to reach one child when the system wanted to give up. Worthy. Yuki touched the sphere with aged fingers. She remembered the earthquake in Nepal. Thousands dead, infrastructure destroyed, disease spreading. She had coordinated 47 relief organizations, navigated political nightmares, worked 20-hour days for 6 months. She was 63 then. Her body nearly failed. The people lived. Worthy. Aisha was last. She placed her hand against the Arbiter and felt it scan deep, deeper than bone and blood. It saw the refugee camps in Syria, the child soldiers in Congo, the rape survivors in Bosnia. She had held their pain, carried their trauma, given pieces of her own soul to help them heal. Some nights she could not sleep for the weight of what she knew. Worthy. The chamber exploded with noise. Aliens shouted in confusion, anger, disbelief. How could this be? These were not warriors. These were nothing. The Arbiter's light intensified, forcing everyone to shield their eyes. When it dimmed, new words appeared. 5 worthy combatants found. Humanity qualifies. Trials will commence in 48 hours. Throck roared and charged forward, but security fields activated, holding him back. Other warriors protested, demanding explanations. The Concordat Council appeared, calling for order. Elena stood with the 5 humans, trying to understand what had just happened. These ordinary people, these everyday heroes, had done what the galaxy's greatest warriors could not. Dr. Chen looked at his hand, still tingling from the contact. "I don't understand," he said quietly, but Aisha understood. She had seen into the Arbiter's depths during the scanning, felt something ancient and knowing. "It's not looking for strength," she said. "It's looking for something else." "What?" Maria asked. Aisha met her eyes. "People who know how to fight battles that can't be won." The trials began with no warning. One moment the 5 humans were in their quarters, trying to prepare for something they could not understand. The next moment white light surrounded them and reality shifted. They stood on a barren moon, the ground beneath their feet gray dust that puffed with each step. The sky was black, filled with stars too bright and unfamiliar. A single dim sun hung on the horizon, providing barely enough light to see. The air was breathable but smelled of sulfur and metal. In the distance, twisted rock formations jutted from the ground like broken teeth. "Where are we?" Marcus asked, his voice tight with controlled fear. "The first trial," Yuki said calmly. She had already spotted the emergency kit nearby. Standard issue for all participants. Survival. Around them, scattered across the moon's surface, other participants appeared. Throck materialized with his squad of Crithians, immediately checking their weapons and armor. A group of Vexthor appeared as balls of energy, already scanning the environment with their enhanced senses. The Gorath landed with ground-shaking impacts, their massive bodies designed for harsh conditions. Dr. Chen opened the emergency kit. Inside were basic supplies, water for 3 days, protein bars, a medical kit, a basic shelter unit, and a location beacon. Not much, he observed. It's a test, Aisha said. They want to see how we handle limited resources. In the distance, a Crithian war cry echoed across the empty landscape. They had spotted another team and were charging to engage. The philosophy was simple. Eliminate competition early, take their supplies, increase your own chances of survival. Should we move? Maria asked, her firefighter instincts telling her to find defensible ground. Not yet, Yuki said. She was studying the rock formations, the shadows, the way the thin atmosphere moved. Look, those rocks. The patterns suggest underground caves. And see there? That shimmer? Could be water ice. While other teams rushed to fight each other, the humans moved carefully toward the nearest rock formation. Marcus kept watch behind them. Dr. Chen monitored everyone's breathing, looking for signs of altitude sickness or atmospheric problems. Maria carried the supplies, her strength used for support rather than combat. Aisha watched the others, ready to help anyone who needed it. They found the cave entrance just as the first explosions lit up the distance. Someone had found weapons. Someone else was using them. Inside the cave, the temperature was more stable. Yuki's instinct had been correct. Deposits of frozen water lined the deeper chambers. They had shelter, they had water, and most importantly, they had time. We should set up a defensive position, Maria suggested, in case someone comes. No, Dr. Chen said, surprising himself. We stay quiet. Let them fight each other. We preserve our energy and supplies. It went against every instinct the others had seen in the warrior species, but it made sense for survival. They set up the shelter unit deep in the cave, rationed their food carefully, and took turns on watch. Above them, on the surface, the sounds of combat continued for 2 days. On the 3rd day, the second trial began without warning. The humans found themselves transported again, this time to what looked like an ancient fortress. Stone walls rose 50 feet high, battlements showing signs of past conflicts. In the center stood a pillar of blue light that stretched to the sky. The Arbiter's voice filled their minds. Defend the structure, survive the siege. Before anyone could ask questions, the first wave of drones appeared on the horizon. They were combat machines, sleek and deadly, armed with energy weapons that could cut through stone. Hundreds of them approaching in organized formations. Around the fortress, other participants took defensive positions. Thrak and his remaining Crithians manned the walls, their powerful weapons ready. A group of Vexthor created energy barriers. The Gorath positioned themselves as living shields, their dense bodies able to absorb tremendous damage. The humans stood in the center of the fortress, looking very small and very vulnerable. We need weapons, Maria said urgently. No time, Marcus replied. He was watching the drones, his eyes tracking their movement patterns. Years of working with children who thought in different patterns had taught him to see order in apparent chaos. Look at them. See how they move? Group formations. They're learning from each other. So? Maria asked. So they're networked. They share information. Which means an idea sparked in Dr. Chen's eyes. Which means if we can capture one, we might be able to access that network. The first wave hit the fortress walls with devastating force. Energy bolts rained down and the defenders fired back with equal violence. In the chaos, nobody noticed the humans slipping out a side gate. They found a damaged drone quickly. The Vexthor had wounded it and it crawled along the ground trying to repair itself. Maria used her strength to pin it down while Dr. Chen opened its access panel with tools from the medical kit. It's like surgery, he muttered, his hands steady despite the battle raging nearby. Find the critical systems, understand the connections, make careful adjustments. He worked while Marcus watched the drone's behavior, predicting what it would try to do. Yuki gathered materials from the battlefield, damaged circuits, broken weapons, anything useful. Aisha stood guard, but she was also talking quietly to the drone. What are you doing? Maria asked. It has a processor, Aisha explained. Processing means something like thought. Thought means something that can be reached. She spoke to the machine like she spoke to trauma survivors, finding the core of what drove it. It took 4 hours, but Dr. Chen successfully reprogrammed the drone. Now it responded to their commands. Better yet, through it, they could access the network that controlled all the drones. Marcus began identifying command patterns. Dr. Chen sent carefully crafted signals through the network. Yuki organized the captured drones into defensive formations. Aisha found the semi-sentient AI that controlled the siege and began a very strange negotiation. By the end of the second day, the fortress was no longer under attack. The humans had turned 47 drones to their side, created a peaceful zone around the structure, and convinced the siege AI that its objectives could be better met through cooperation than destruction. The other participants stared in confusion. The Crithians had fought bravely, losing half their number. The Vexthor had exhausted their energy. The Gorath were damaged and worn, but the humans stood unharmed, surrounded by drones that now served them. "This is not combat," Throck roared. "This is cheating." The Arbiter appeared above the fortress, its surface glowing. Challenge complete. Humanity advances. That night, in the brief rest period between trials, the remaining alien participants gathered to discuss what was happening. They had been eliminated one by one. Species that had competed in the trials for centuries were gone, sent home in shame. Yet these 5 humans who had not fired a single shot, who had not killed a single opponent, continued to advance. "They do not fight," a surviving Vexthor said. "They do not seem to understand what warriors are," a Gorath added. Throck said nothing. He had been watching the humans carefully. They were weak, yes, fragile, but they won anyway. How? In their own quarters, the humans sat together, exhausted but alive. Dr. Chen wrapped a bandage around Maria's arm where she had scraped at moving equipment. Marcus was already asleep, his body pushed past its limits. Yuki reviewed their supplies with calm efficiency. Aisha stared at the wall, processing everything they had experienced. "We're not supposed to be here," Maria said quietly. "We're not warriors." "No," Aisha agreed. "But maybe that's the point." Elena visited them before the next trial. She brought news from the Concordate Council. The ancient scholars had been researching the Arbiter's origins, going back through records 5,000 years old. They had found something important. "The trials have a different name in the oldest texts," Elena explained. "They were called the Trials of Guardianship, not the Trials of Worth." "What's the difference?" Dr. Chen asked. "I don't know yet," Elena admitted. "But I think you're about to find out." The third trial began, and this time the humans knew they were being tested for something far more important than combat skill. The fourth trial brought the final 8 participants to a place that existed between reality and simulation. They stood on a platform surrounded by infinite white space, and before them, a world appeared like a projection, but solid and real. It was a colony world, home to millions of beings. From their vantage point, they could see cities, farms, oceans, and mountains. Life thrived below. But something was wrong. The sun was dying, expanding too rapidly, and calculations showed that within 30 days the planet would be consumed by fire. Everyone on the surface would die. The Arbiter's instructions were clear. "Defend the colony. Save the inhabitants. You have unlimited resources and technology. Find the solution." Throck and the 2 remaining Crithians immediately began planning. They had access to massive spacecraft, advanced weapons, and shield technology. They worked to create a barrier that could protect the planet from the expanding sun. It was a good plan, using their warrior strength and tactical knowledge. The 3 Vexthor took a different approach. They attempted to use their energy manipulation to stabilize the sun itself, to reverse the expansion. Their power was immense, and for a moment it seemed possible. But the humans stood very still, watching. Something felt wrong. "This isn't real," Marcus said quietly. "What do you mean?" Maria asked. "Look at the people down there. Watch them." Marcus pointed to the colony. The inhabitants went about their daily lives unaware of the coming disaster. "They don't know. Nobody told them. Why?" Dr. Chen felt a chill run through him. "Because that's part of the test." Aisha nodded slowly, understanding. "We have unlimited resources to save them. But we're up here and they're down there." Yuki closed her eyes, thinking of every disaster she had coordinated. "The question isn't whether we can save them. It's whether we're willing to go down there ourselves." They investigated the technology available to them. As promised, there were massive ships, shields, energy systems. Everything needed to protect the planet. But there was a catch buried in the physics calculations. Dr. Chen found it first. The shields would work. They would protect the planet. But someone had to maintain them from inside the danger zone. Someone had to stay on the planet's surface, manually adjusting the systems as the sun expanded for 30 days straight. The radiation would be fatal. Whoever stayed would die. The Crithians discovered this too. Throck stared at the calculations, his warrior training screaming at him to find another solution. There had to be a way to win without sacrifice. Warriors sought victory, not death. The Vexthor found similar limitations in their approach. They could stabilize the sun, but only by channeling energy through a living being who would act as a conductor. The being would be consumed in the process, their energy used to save millions. For 3 days, the alien participants searched for another way. They tried automated systems, but the technology required conscious thought to adapt to changing conditions. They tried working in shifts, but the exposure was cumulative. Anyone who stayed long enough to complete the work would die. They tried hundreds of solutions, and everyone required the ultimate sacrifice. On the 4th day, Throck made his choice. "I will not die for beings I do not know," he said. "This is not honor. This is waste," the Vexthor agreed. "We preserve ourselves for future battles. Dying here serves no purpose." They withdrew from the trial, choosing to fail rather than sacrifice themselves. The Arbiter accepted their withdrawal without judgment and sent them home. Now only the 5 humans remained. They stood together, looking down at the colony world where millions of innocent beings lived their lives unaware that their son was dying. "There's no other way," Dr. Chen said softly. "Someone has to stay." "No," Maria corrected. "All of us stay." They looked at her in surprise. "Think about it," Maria continued. 5 of us working together can maintain the systems better than 1. We can support each other, keep each other going. We multiply our time. "We still die," Marcus pointed out gently. "Yes." Maria met his eyes. "But they live. Millions of them." "Isn't that the job?" Dr. Chen thought about all the surgeries he had performed. How many times had he sacrificed his health, his sleep, his life outside the hospital? How many pieces of himself had he given to save others? This was just one more surgery. The biggest one. The last one. "I've run into burning buildings," Maria said. "Buildings that were collapsing. I knew I might not come out. I went anyway. This is the same." Yuki smiled softly. "I'm 67. I've lived a full life. I've saved thousands of people from disasters. If my last act saves millions more, that's a good ending." Marcus thought of his students, the children everyone else gave up on. He never gave up. He fought for them even when it was hopeless. "I teach kids that every life matters. I can't say that and then walk away from millions of lives." Aisha had been quiet, but now she spoke. "I've carried the pain of thousands. I've held the trauma that breaks people. I've given pieces of my soul to help others heal." She paused. "This is what we do. This is who we are." They descended to the planet together. They set up the shield systems, coordinated their efforts, and began the long work of keeping millions safe while the sun slowly killed them. The radiation was worse than the simulation suggested. On day 3, Dr. Chen's hands began to shake from exposure. Maria's strength started to fade by day 7. Yuki developed a cough that wouldn't stop. Marcus's vision blurred. Aisha felt her thoughts becoming confused, but they continued. When one person weakened, the others supported them. They shared duties, covered for each other, refused to give up. Below them, the colony continued its daily life, never knowing that 5 humans were dying to save them. On day 15, something changed. The simulation began to flicker. Reality rippled like water. The Arbiter appeared above them, and for the first time since the trials began, it spoke at length. Guardianship confirmed. Trials suspended. The dying sun disappeared. The radiation vanished. The 5 humans stood on solid ground, their bodies restored but their exhaustion still real. They had been ready to die. They had accepted it. The confusion was almost worse than the sacrifice would have been. The white space around them filled with images, scenes from 5,000 years ago. The progenitors appeared, beings of incredible power but not warriors. They were teachers, healers, and builders. They had created the Concordat, not as a military alliance but as a protective organization. They had designed the trials to find species worthy of continuing their work. "Guardians," Aisha whispered, understanding flooding through her. They were looking for guardians. The Arbiter showed them what had happened. Over thousands of years, the Concordat had forgotten its purpose. The trials became about strength, about dominance, about glory. Species competed to prove they were superior warriors. The true meaning was lost. Every species that approached the Arbiter did so with thoughts of victory and honor. Their minds were filled with battle strategies and dreams of conquest. The Arbiter rejected them all because they had forgotten what it meant to be a guardian. But the humans came with different thoughts. Dr. Chen thought of saving children. Maria thought of running into fires. Yuki thought of coordinating disaster relief. Marcus thought of teaching those others abandoned. Aisha thought of healing trauma. They did not think of glory. They thought of service. The Arbiter brought them to a larger space where all the Concordat leaders were assembled. Species from across the galaxy watched as the ancient machine explained its purpose for the first time in millennia. The trials were never about finding warriors, they were about finding guardians, beings willing to sacrifice without glory, to serve without recognition, to protect because it is right, not because it brings honor. Throck stood among the observers, his massive frame somehow diminished. He had been champion 3 times. He had brought glory to his people, but he had never understood what the trials actually meant. The Arbiter turned its attention to the 5 humans. Humanity qualifies, guardianship is offered, accept or decline. The 5 looked at each other. They were tired, confused, and overwhelmed. They had come here thinking they were ordinary people. Now an ancient artifact was offering them responsibility for the entire galaxy. Can we discuss it? Dr. Chen asked. You may. They huddled together, these 5 ordinary humans who had done something extraordinary. They spoke quietly for several minutes while billions watched and waited. Finally, they turned back to face the Arbiter. Aisha spoke for them all. We accept the guardianship, she said, but not as rulers, not as masters, as partners. She looked at the assembled species. We're not stronger than any of you. We're not smarter. We're not special. But we learned something on Earth, Maria added. We learned how to fight when there's no glory in it. How to sacrifice when nobody's watching. We learned how to be human, Marcus said simply. Dr. Chen stepped forward. And maybe if you're willing, we can teach you. Not because we're better, but because we're all supposed to be guardians. All of us. Together. The Arbiter's surface blazed with light so bright that everyone had to shield their eyes. When the light faded, words appeared one final time. Trials concluded. Guardians found. Not in one species. In all who choose to learn. Commander Throck stood in what used to be a military academy on his homeworld. The building looked the same from outside, but inside everything had changed. Where once there had been weapons training, now there were medical courses. Where tactical simulations had run, now disaster response scenarios played out. His students, young Crithians who had dreamed of glory in battle, now learned how to rescue civilians from collapsed buildings. This is weak, one student complained. We are warriors. We should fight. Throck looked at the young Crithian and remembered saying similar things himself. He remembered standing before the Arbiter, so certain of his worthiness only to be rejected. He remembered watching 5 small humans do what he could not. Come with me, Throck said. He took the student to the medical wing, where a plague had recently struck a nearby colony. Crithian doctors, trained in the new ways, worked alongside human advisors. They were using Crithian strength not to destroy but to save. Heavy equipment that would take normal beings hours to move. Crithians could position in minutes. Their armored skin let them work in contaminated areas without protection. Their size allowed them to carry multiple patients to safety. You want to be strong? Throck asked his student. Use your strength to save lives. That is what true warriors do. The student watched a Crithian doctor carefully inject medicine into a small alien child. The doctor's massive hands were gentle, precise. The child lived. The student said nothing, but Throck saw something change in the young one's eyes. Across the galaxy, similar changes were happening. The Vexthor, who had used their psionic powers for combat, now trained in therapy techniques. They discovered they could sense trauma, could help heal minds damaged by violence. Aisha worked with them personally, teaching them how to enter the spaces where pain lived and help people find their way out. You feel too much, an elder Vexthor said during one training session. You carry the suffering of others. How do you bear it? Aisha smiled tiredly. You learn to share the weight. You never carry it alone. The silicon-based Gorth found purpose in construction and engineering. Their incredible strength and durability made them perfect for building shelters in disaster zones, for creating infrastructure on harsh worlds. They worked alongside Yuki, who taught them coordination and logistics. She was 70 now, moving slower, but her mind was as sharp as ever. Why do you continue? A Gorth asked her. You are old. You have earned rest. Because the work isn't finished, Yuki replied simply. And because I can still help. Not everyone accepted the changes. Some species clung to the old ways, insisting that warriors were meant to fight, not to heal. Some argued that the trials had been corrupted by human weakness. But even among the resistant, cracks appeared in the old certainty. Marcus ran educational programs across 40 worlds now. He specialized in helping young beings whose cultures had suddenly shifted beneath their feet. He worked with children who had been raised to be warriors and now did not know what they were supposed to be. You can still be strong, he told them. You can still be brave. You can still fight, but fight for something that matters. Fight to protect those who can't protect themselves. Fight to save lives, not take them. Dr. Chen had trained over 200 alien doctors in techniques once thought impossible. Species with different biologies learned to perform surgery on each other. Treatments developed for one race were adapted for others. Medical knowledge spread across the galaxy faster than ever before. He worked until his hands ached and his vision blurred. But every life saved made it worthwhile. Maria had created the Concordat Emergency Response Force, a rapid deployment team that could reach disaster zones within hours. The force included Crithians, Vexthor, Gorath, humans, and dozens of other species working together. They fought fires, evacuated flood zones, rescued people from earthquakes. They were warriors, yes, but they fought nature and circumstance, not each other. Elena had become the director of Guardian Integration, helping coordinate the massive cultural shift across the Concordat. She worked with governments, trained new Guardians, and smoothed over the conflicts that inevitably arose. It was exhausting work, but she had never felt more alive. The Arbiter remained on Apex Prime, silent now but present. Sometimes Elena visited it, standing in the quiet chamber where everything had changed. Thank you, she said to it once, for seeing what we couldn't see in ourselves. The sphere did not respond, but Elena felt certain it heard. Then came the day that tested everything they had built. The Void Swarm appeared at the edge of Concordat space, an ancient enemy not seen in 5,000 years. They were creatures of pure hunger, consuming everything in their path. Planets, stars, life itself, all of it fuel for their endless appetite. The old response would have been simple: assemble fleets, fight, destroy the enemy. But the Concordat was different now. Yes, they assembled fleets. Yes, they prepared to fight. But that was only part of the response. Maria's emergency response force began evacuating threatened worlds before the swarm arrived. Working at incredible speed, they moved billions of beings to safety. Marcus coordinated shelters for refugees across 100 worlds. Yuki managed supply lines and logistics for the largest humanitarian operation in galactic history. Dr. Chen set up field hospitals, preparing for casualties. Aisha established trauma centers, knowing that even those who survived would carry deep scars. The military fleets, now including warriors trained in the new way, did not just fight the swarm. They bought time. They held lines. They sacrificed themselves so that rescue operations could continue. Throk commanded one such fleet, and when his ship was surrounded, he did not think of glory or honor. He thought of the hospital ship behind him, full of evacuees. He held his position until they escaped. Then and only then did he retreat. The battle lasted for weeks. The swarm was defeated not through superior firepower, but through superior purpose. Every species in the Concordat worked together with a focus that would have been impossible before. They did not fight for dominance or resources or pride. They fought because millions of lives depended on them. When it was over, when the last swarm ships were destroyed and the refugees were returning home, the galaxy took stock of what had happened. The victory belonged to everyone, not to the strongest species or the best warriors, to all of them, working as guardians. 10 years after the trials, Ambassador Elena Vasquez, now quite elderly, stood before the Centennial Concordat Assembly. Representatives from all species had gathered to mark the anniversary and to reflect on what had changed. "We did not save the galaxy by being stronger," Elena said, her voice carrying through the vast chamber. We saved it by remembering something the progenitors knew 5,000 years ago. The greatest warriors are not those who fight enemies best. They are those who fight best for others. She paused, looking across the assembled species. Crethian sat beside Vexthor. Gorath shared space with small beings they once could have crushed. Humans, still the youngest members, worked alongside species that had traveled the stars for millennia. The 5 humans who passed the trials are here today, Elena continued. But they would tell you they are not special. Dr. Chen still performs surgeries, though his hands shake with age. Maria still runs into danger to pull people out. Yuki still coordinates relief efforts, now from a wheelchair. Marcus still teaches, working with the next generation. Aisha still heals trauma, carrying burdens that would break others. The 5 humans sat together in the audience, looking uncomfortable with the attention. They had never wanted to be heroes. They had just wanted to help. They showed us that being human is not about being one species, Elena said. It is about a choice. The choice to sacrifice without glory, to serve without recognition, to protect because it is right, not because it brings reward. The Arbiter, silent for 10 years, suddenly activated. Its surface blazed with light, and words appeared in every mind present. Trials concluded. Guardians found, not in one species, in all who learned. A pause, then new words, ones never spoken before. The progenitors left this message. When the galaxy learns to be guardians, the guardians will no longer be needed. You have learned. We are proud. The Arbiter's light faded, then went dark. After 5,000 years of service, its task was complete. The galaxy no longer needed an artifact to tell them what they should be. They had learned the lesson. In the silence that followed, Throck stood. The massive Crithian warrior, former champion, walked to where the 5 humans sat. He knelt before them, a gesture of deepest respect in his culture. You taught us what we had forgotten, he said quietly. That strength without compassion is not strength. That victory without purpose is not victory. That being a warrior means protecting others, not defeating them. Other species representatives followed one by one, paying respect to the humans who had changed everything. But Dr. Chen shook his head. No, he said firmly. You do not kneel to us. We do not deserve it. He stood, helping Throck to his feet. The Crithian towered over him, but in that moment they were equals. We are all guardians now, Dr. Chen said. All of us. That is the point. Maria stood beside him. We just reminded you of something you already knew. We are not your teachers, Marcus added. We are your partners. We fail together or succeed together, Yuki said. We are human together, Aisha finished. All of us. Later, after the ceremonies ended, the 5 original humans walked through a garden that had been built on Apex Prime. It grew where the trial arena once stood. Children from dozens of species played there now, running and laughing without knowing that this place had once been dedicated to combat. A small Crethian child, no taller than Marcus's waist, ran up to them. She held a flower, one of the native Earth species that now grew throughout the garden. Are you the humans? She asked in accented but clear English. Yes, Dr. Chen said gently. My grandfather says you taught the galaxy how to be good. The child held out the flower. Is that true? The 5 humans looked at each other. They thought about the surgeries, the fires, the disasters, the students, the trauma. They thought about all the times they had fought battles without glory, had sacrificed without recognition, had helped others simply because it needed to be done. No, Elena said, joining them in the garden. They taught the galaxy that good was always there. Sometimes you just need someone to remind you. The child smiled and ran off to play with friends, a human child, a Vexthor youth, and a young Gorath, all playing together in a garden dedicated to peace. Dr. Chen watched them and felt tears in his eyes. Do you think it will last? He asked quietly. Will they remember? Aisha smiled. As long as there are people willing to fight for others, it will last. As long as there are people who choose compassion over glory, Maria added. As long as there are guardians, Marcus said. Yuki had the last word, as she often did. As long as they choose to be human, in the way that matters most. They stood together, 5 ordinary people who had done something extraordinary, watching the children play in the garden. The galaxy had changed because of them, but more importantly, they had reminded the galaxy that it could change itself. The sun set on Apex Prime, painting the sky in colors from a dozen different worlds. And in that moment, everything was as it should be. Not perfect, never perfect, but better, always trying to be better. And that, after all, was the most human thing of all.